Hi, everyone. This is Dorie Clark. I am so excited to be joining you today. My good friend Bruce Turkel is going to be here momentarily, and the two of us are going to be talking about branding in 2021 and beyond. Bruce is amazing. He is a branding expert. He lives in Miami and for many years ran an advertising agency and was actually the brainchild of marketing for a lot of tourism campaigns, including Miami and other places. Bruce is also the author of this book, which is all about them, which I actually recently read, which is kind of a cool and fantastic read. And we are really looking forward to having a good conversation with you guys. Bruce is actually going to be joining us right now. Mr. Bruce Turkel, it is so wonderful to have you here.
Hello, Dorie. How are you?
I am great. And I actually was just waving this book. Bruce and I were hanging out in Miami and were able to spend some quality time together. So, Bruce, I wanted to actually just start out by saying hi to the great people who are joining us. Please feel free to type into the chat box. Let us know if you're here, and we want to see who's here. Actually, our new mutual friend, thanks to you, Susan Ford Collins, is here. Taiwo is here. Rashmi is here. Viz is here. Katie. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We want to be sure to take your questions as well. So feel free throughout the course of this to type them into the chat box. It's a great opportunity to ask Bruce your pressing branding questions, and I'm happy to weigh in as well. But Bruce, the original genesis of this conversation was that you and I were having a chat, and you actually said to me when we were having lunch in Miami, my assistant has created this massive list, this gargantuan list of questions. Would you be willing to answer them? Oh my goodness. And I said, sure, let's do it. But why don't we share it with other people as well? And you were gracious enough to do that. So Bruce, maybe you can kick us off. You have questions for me. I have questions for you. What's your first question?
Well, my first question is not a question. I want to tell everyone out there before we start that we've all heard the expression, never meet your heroes, because apparently when you do, you usually set yourself up for a letdown. So Dorie and I met, and she is everything I assumed and expected, and that you assume and expect, and more. So she is so incredible that I actually had the nerve to ask all these questions, which you don't usually ask someone of their business, like, tell me how your business works. And then she's so awesome. She said, well, why don't we let everybody in on this? So that's why we're here. So hopefully I'm going to get through as many of these as I can. But my first question, and it's probably the most important, and it's odd because I'm the one who usually builds brands for people, but I'm asking you about how you built yours, is, anytime we have a friend or someone who says that they're cool, it means they're not. When someone says they're hip, it means they're not. And to move that into the world where you live, to your silo, when someone says they're a thought leader, it means they're not really a thought leader. Yet you are all those things, but you're also such a wonderful person. And I'm wondering, since your name is your brand name, how do you separate Dorie Clark you from Dorie Clark you? And how did you create that persona?
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. It's quite kind of you. What I would say to that is, I think in some ways, Bruce, like everybody else who has their own business, I actually started out not really having a very clear sense of what I was doing or what I was good at. I originally started out and I thought I was going to, my original incarnation of my business was that I was going to do political consulting. And then I just ended up not really getting any political clients, but I ended up getting like nonprofit and organizational clients. And so, okay, well, I guess I'll do this. And so I went into marketing and PR. And so my business evolved over time. And so part of it was just moving into the areas that seemed more receptive to my message. But I think in general, what has probably informed my view of branding, I guess you could say, was not to get all too identity politics empowerment on you, but I came out as a teenager. I was 13 when I realized I was gay, and I just fueled, I guess, by adolescent indignation. I was just like, I'm not going to contort myself to fit anybody's impression of anything. Like, they're going to have to deal. And so my view of business, I think, in some ways, is very similar. That I think it is always important to be high quality and professional, but I really believe that the most important thing that we can do is just relentlessly be ourselves and sort of drive that, because ultimately it turns out to be so crucial in differentiating you, because so many other people are sanding themselves down and sort of sanding down their edges, which makes for a pretty weak product.
So you just not only answered my question, you answered my next 2 or 3 questions, and you confirmed one of my favorite quotes. I use it all the time with my clients, which is Oscar Wilde, "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken." So you understanding that at 13, because of what you had to go through, in a way leapfrogged you past what many of us went through, where the whole insecurity of, no, I have to be like them, no, I have to do that. I eventually learned, what they want to buy is who I am. I always say people don't choose what you do, they choose who you are. And you have very clearly internalized that message. I was going to ask you, how do you avoid being pigeonholed as a reinvention expert and do all these other things that you do? But that's how, because they're not buying your function. They're not choosing your function. They're choosing you. I want Dorie to be involved in this, whatever this is, because you've been so clearly, strongly, and honestly yourself.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Speaking of being honestly and relentlessly yourself, this is just a nice compliment I want to highlight. Michal says, Bruce spoke to my University of Miami marketing students in the 90s. Best guest speaker I ever booked. Epic. So yes, we are all cheering for Bruce Turkel. That's wonderful. Thank you.
She was awesome. I love being in her program. We stayed in touch for years afterwards, and then it's so nice. It's so nice that we're still in the same orbit. Thank you.
I love it. And we have so many great folks tuning in. Thanks, guys, for joining us. I see Sandra and Carolyn, my old pal, Jamie Siako. Jamie, I'm writing musical theater now, too, inspired by you, my man. We have Vashant. We have Laura, my friend Minhei. I was just speaking for her group for the IFC earlier today. This is great. Linda from Atlanta. Pat's from New Mexico. My pal Zhao Yu is here. I love it. Yvonne, Rashmi, Debbie, Irisa, Douglas, we're so glad to have all of you here. Thank you very much. So, Bruce, I have a question for you. Now, you are a marketing and branding talent. You know some of the great stories in your book, all about them, among others of your works. You talk about campaigns that you created, and I am actually curious, for people who are themselves, maybe they're a consultant, maybe they're a coach. What and certainly in your career, branding yourself in your second career as an author and as a speaker, what are the principles of corporate branding that you have applied that you think enable people to break out and break through? How are they similar or dissimilar?
I think actually that's a great question, because one of the things I have found is that all the things that I learned working for those companies, for Bacardi, for American Express, for Discovery Channel, for Nike, all of those things actually directly translate to what we all want to do. And what I discovered was, when I spent time with these companies and learned what they did, and then I talk to people and they say, oh, I didn't know that, and they feel bad about it. It's not anyone's fault. Nobody teaches us this stuff. I have a design degree. They surely should have taught it to me, but nobody does. And it's really a very easy map to follow. The first one, it's the title of that book, All About Them. The best brands do not actually talk about the brand itself. They talk about the consumer, the customer, the community, the country, the church, whoever they're reaching out to. And we forget that. But if you watch ads by Apple, by Yamaha, by BMW, by Nike, all the companies that get it, they never talk about themselves. They always talk about how much better you are because you use their products or you use their services. The second point is quite simple. It's hearts, then minds. They all make an intellectual connection an emotional connection before they make an intellectual connection. We don't do that. When we meet people, we talk about what we do for a living, where we went to college, whatever it is. We give them facts. People don't want facts. They want to have an emotional connection. Those facts become what we call RTBs, reasons to believe. Oh, I want to hire Dorie. By the way, do you know she has a degree from Harvard? Oh, well, that makes her even better. But if you came out and said, hi, I'm Dorie Clark, I have a master's from Harvard, it's like, well, isn't that nice? And you get patted on the head. Companies know that. People, the best companies, people don't know that. We have to make sure that our message is simple. Think about how complicated these businesses are, and yet think about how simple their messages are. Volvo's business is so complicated. Cars, motors, electricity, gasoline, multiple countries, leather, rubber, insurance, everything else. But you know them for one word, safety. And that one word is not even the product they sell. They sell transportation. So make it simple, make it quick. What can you say, boom, that they get it? Make it yours. Most people don't own their brand because most of us tend to be opportunists. Oh, there's something I can do. Oh, there's something I can do. And we go out and we say we can do all these things. We're generalists. But the people and the companies you really know stand for something. So the question I would ask everybody who's paying attention right now is, what do you stand for? And more importantly, who knows that you stand for it? And there's just two more. Number 6 is all 5 senses. You have to make sure that your brand is sensual, not sexual, mind you, but sensual, meaning it has a taste, a touch, a smell, plus a sight and sound. Most of us only build our marketing based on what you see and what you hear. But you have to include all those senses. And finally, repeat, repeat, repeat. Once you stand for something, you say it over and over and over again, which, by the way, is job security for people like you and I, because we come up with these ways of people to do it. BMW has been the ultimate driving machine since 1972. The only thing their cars today have in common with the cars then is 4 wheels and a steering wheel. But their brand, their value has not changed.
Yeah, such good points, Bruce. I love that. And so why don't we actually open up the floor? Again, folks, we are talking with our good friend, Bruce Turkel. You can find out more about him. You can follow him, sign up for his newsletter, bruceturkel.com. Make sure to follow him on LinkedIn as well. And I am Dorie Clark. You can find out more at dorieclark.com. Same deal, email newsletter. It's awesome. Sign up. And so
it is an Ibanez. You're correct.
Thank you, my man. So please feel free to type your questions into the chat box for me and or Bruce. We're happy to tackle them. But in the meantime, Bruce, I know your assistant had like even more questions. Are there other questions you wanted to raise?
Oh my God, yes. But I'm going to do because of where we're going with this and everyone who's paying attention, I'm going to leave the technical ones for later. Here's one I want to know that you are a master at. You keep people in your community. You and I were introduced by a mutual friend. Oh, it's got to be 10 or 15 years ago. We have been tangentially in touch because someone's in town or someone reads something, or I'd write an article or you'd write an article and we comment on it. But you have managed to keep me intrigued and in your community. There's always interesting things coming out from you. There's always new things to learn. And I'm curious how you do that. Everyone that I know that I told them I'm doing this with you said, oh my God, Dorie's my best friend, or, oh, I read her stuff, or I know her. I didn't know how many people we had in common. I don't know that there's an answer for this question. I think it's just you and those beautiful blue eyes and that smile. But how do you do that? How do you keep everybody in this circle where they all feel warm and they all feel like they have a real relationship with you?
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it, and I certainly try. That's for sure. I would say, as with a lot of things, there's different circles. I have a community, an online community called it's a course called the Recognized Expert course for folks who want to learn about it. They can find it there, and the folks in that community I would say are the people that on a regular basis, it's like, lifetime membership to this online community. And so every day I'm in there like rolling up my sleeves and responding to messages in the online community and offering advice and things like that. But for sort of people who I don't necessarily know personally, one of the best ways that I connect with them is my email newsletter. And this is something that, for years, I didn't really focus on or think about that much. I would do things like, so you see down here, this has got my Twitter handle at Dorie Clark. I would do like things that in retrospect, I'm like, oh, Dorie, why did you do that? Where I would write a guest post, and I wrote a lot. I wrote for Harvard Business Review and Forbes, and I'd write these guest posts, and my bio would basically just say like, oh, follow her on Twitter or something like that, which, I mean, like whatever good that does you, right? Like Twitter is fantastic in certain industries. I certainly think if you're in journalism, it's important. If you're in politics, it's important. I think for business, it's the user growth has been flat for a very, very long time. So it's not necessarily the thing. What is, I think, crucially important is your opt-in email list. And so it's always a good opportunity to mention that folks can join my opt-in email list at dorieclark.com/entrepreneur. You get a free self-assessment as well when you do it. But email lists are so critical because this is the opportunity for people to raise their hand and say, yes, I want to hear from you. And too many people shunt the email newsletter to the side. They don't pay proper attention to it. They let it languish. I used to do this sometimes too, but I really focused a number of years ago on getting disciplined about it because I realized it is kind of a sacred trust in today's society. There's an amazing quote by Herbert Simon, who is a computer scientist and thinker at Carnegie Mellon in the 70s. And he said basically that in a world with too much information, there's like too much of one thing and not enough of another. And so if there's too much information, what it creates is a scarcity of something else. And the scarcity is of attention. And so if you have people who are saying, all right, I am willing to pay attention to you, you have to honor that. And so I have put an enormous amount of time and care, especially into my e-newsletter communication, so that ideally, what I'm striving for is that the people who get my newsletters really feel like they're having a conversation with me. I don't want it to be this kind of, fake, salesy, blah, 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 like reading a corporate report. I want them to feel like they are talking to me because that is what breeds the kind of connection that validates that trust that people have put in it. So that's kind of how I think about it, if that's helpful.
That's beautiful. I started mine in 2007, and I have been fanatical about every single week. I've never missed a deadline, sending out more and more things I'm thinking about. And to your point, people are responding all the time. I hope I have somewhere near the sense of camaraderie with them that you have, because you were just a master at it. So then, what do you see as the best platform for keeping everybody together? Because one thing I've noticed you've done is you said, here's my website, it's dorieclark.com. Then if you want this, it's dorieclark/entrepreneur. Now I see your Twitter handle. And we're all building these giant beds of nails with all these razor sharp points. But to continue with my metaphor, when someone lays on a razor sharp bed of nails, they don't feel anything because it's one very smooth surface. Whereas if you're walking down the beach and you step on a pop top, you need stitches, you need a tetanus shot, you're hobbling around for a while. And so we all have all these things we're doing. You have managed to really funnel them into one very, very powerful point, to now mix my metaphors. And I'm curious how you do that. Do you do that intentionally? Do you do that by saying, here's what you're going to get from me, here's what you can expect from me? Or do you just put all these things out there with the concept of chumming when you're fishing and people can grab whatever it is they're interested in?
Well, I think that's a great question, Bruce. I think it's important, of course, to sort of meet people where they're at, in the sense that, there's some people that like different channels more than others. And so I think if we want to reach them, we have to respect that. We also, of course, have to recognize our own limitations. I mean, there's some channels that just, it's not our thing, right? My beloved assistant, John, like, I don't know, 18 months ago. He's like, you have to get on TikTok. TikTok is the future. TikTok is, this important thing. And I'm like, John, I totally hear you. I totally get it, man. And, you see like, okay, Gary Vaynerchuk's on it. Okay, they're making these musicals. That's amazing. It's just, you can't play in every space. And so I've decided that TikTok is probably not going to be my space. I don't have the dance moves to compete. I don't know. I'm opting out. But I think that in the places where you can offer value, I think the key thing that I've discovered, and I want to give a hat tip to my friend Bob Glazer, who actually, we had a conversation about a year ago that really helped highlight this for me. And it's just such a simple thing, but I think really important. What I was consciously trying to do for years was to use all the channels that I have to get people onto my email list, because I'm like, okay, if they opt into the email list, then I have a direct line of conversation with them. That's what's really important. And I think ultimately that is what's really important. Because, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, they can be changing the algorithms at any moment. So we just don't have control. So you ultimately want people to be an email subscriber so they can kind of be part of your family in that way. But what I actually had neglected to do, which Bob's example highlighted for me, and it was just like, oh my gosh, it was kind of a duh moment, but I think very powerful, was once I got people on the email list, I was neglecting to remind them that they could also follow me other places. So I started to get much better about using my email list to remind people, oh, hey, well, if you're already on Instagram, if you're already on LinkedIn, if you're already on TikTok, or not TikTok, but Clubhouse or whatever, you can follow me there. And so I began putting in plugs for things like, oh, if you want to, subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. So, right, and of course you have to have banners. So if you want to subscribe to my email newsletter, which is totally different, I have a LinkedIn newsletter and an email newsletter. The LinkedIn newsletter you can get right here. That's a kind of thing that I began reminding people about. So thank you for that question, Bruce. I appreciate it. And I also see here some questions that have come in. Let's give this one to you, Bruce. This is a good question from Sean. He wants to know, is publishing the only way to build your profile or believers out there, or are there other ways? If you have somebody that wants to build a platform, as a thought leader, as a thinker of whatever stripe, do they need to write a book, Bruce, or what should they be doing?
Well, that's so interesting, because the whole way that works is changing. First of all, there's a lot of misconceptions about books that are worth dispelling. Some people make money from books. Some people make a lot of money from books. But it's just like being a musician. What do they say about musicians? You can make a fortune, but you can't make a living. There's a few people who make a lot of money, and then there's a lot of people who work in bars at night and don't make a lot of money. And book publishing is the same. Books are a wonderful business card, and they're a wonderful way to say to someone, hey, this person's an expert. They've written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books. But the word book doesn't even make sense anymore, because it's really nice to have a hardcover book, or to have, multiple hardcover books that you wrote, and I got a bunch of them. But what is a book today? Is it information on a Kindle? Is it something I'm looking at on my iPad? Is it information that I can pick up in any of the social media sites you mentioned? There's lots of ways of publishing. So I would suggest, first of all, that the medium is less important these days, because I love what Dorie said. You have to meet people where they're at. My mom still likes books. I write books so my mom can put them on her coffee table and tell her neighbors what her son does for a living, because otherwise I'm not sure she actually knows. But
my mom read your book, Bruce. Yes, my mom is an evangelist. She loves it.
From what you told me, she pestered you about reading it. See, so books can work. But where you took the information in, does it really matter? And I don't think it does. And nowadays, getting published isn't even that impressive, because you could self-publish, you could hybrid publish, you could print on demand. So to answer his question better, I think what matters is your ability to produce content. Negroponte said it 25 years ago, content is king. I still think that's true. Whether content is a hip hop video, or it's something you're putting on TikTok, or it's a blog post, or it's a bumper sticker, for God's sakes, it doesn't matter. It's what you're able to produce that other people can digest, use for information, for entertainment, for enlightenment, however they choose to use it. And then you get the benefit and they look to you for more. Dorie mentioned about not going on TikTok. And now, of course, we're all being pestered by our friends who have invitations for exclusive Clubhouse. I'm figuring if the guy who cuts my hair offers me an invitation, it's not so exclusive. But the point is that somewhere along the line, you're going to get FOMO and you're going to have to decide, turn that off, sorry. You're going to have to decide how many of those things you want to participate in. But your content, well, you could put that everywhere. And better yet, if you have evangelical followers like Dorie does, they promote your content. So book, maybe, maybe not. What goes in a book? Absolutely. You can't be a thought leader if you're not thinking.
Yeah, love that. Great points here. And just a shout out, you got some fans here, Bruce. Dave says that he has participated in your mastermind and he wants to give a little plug for that, together with Turkel.com. So thanks for that, Dave. That's great. So just a technical question. Sujo wanted to know, what do I actually use for my email list? And what is your opening rate? How do you improve opening rates for emails? So personally, I use a service called Convertkit. I even have a link here. It's my, let's see. Oh, can I do this? All right. It looks like that might've worked. That's my affiliate link. So feel free. If you decide to use it, perhaps it will buy me a latte. That would be exciting. So I've used Convertkit since 2017 and actually I'm very impressed with them. They are my third email service provider. They are very much optimized in the ways that I like. Largely because it's very easy to tag people. And, if you talk about like opening rates and improving open rates, of course, as you might imagine, the best way to improve an opening rate is to make sure that the material that people are getting is hyper targeted to them. The minute they start getting stuff and it's like, man, what does that have to do with me? They're going to start unsubscribing. And so if you are able, as you can in Convertkit, to very seamlessly tag people and then create special sequences based on what they're clicking and what they're doing, then you can give them highly targeted things that will make them want to open it. Yeah, Bruce, it looks like you have a
comment. I feel like I'm in class going, ooh, can I talk? We talk a lot about big data and using technology to do these things, and perhaps Convertkit, which I will check out with your affiliate tag, but perhaps Convertkit is one of those things. But let's also talk about small data. There are things you can do that you already know how to do, but maybe you either didn't think about it or you don't bother. For example, when I write a blog post, my wonderful assistant, Scott, actually reads them. If I quote anybody, he'll write a personal letter to, like I quote Dorie. So he'll write a personal letter. Hey, Dorie, Bruce talked about you in his blog post this week. Thought you might like to see it. Why? Because once Dorie gets it, I'm putting words in your mouth, of course, but once Dorie gets it, it's about her and how awesome she is. So she's going to send it out to her list. Hey, look what this guy wrote about me. Now, they used to say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Then we went to, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Now I would say, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's not who knows you. It's who knows you knows. So if that makes any sense. So I now get to take advantage of Dorie's list because I wrote about her and she wants to show off what I wrote about her. If I write about a particular subject, Scott then looks up anybody in my list who might be interested in that subject and specifically sends the blog post to them. Hey, Bruce wrote about your business or your silo or what you do. That's small data. That's no different than saying, hey, would you give this to your friend, or sixth grade? Hey, Dorie, find out if she likes me. Would you? I mean, that hasn't changed. It's the same process. When I do that, my readership goes up pretty significantly, and it doesn't require any technology. It just requires this. It requires people being people.
Yeah, that's so important, Bruce. I love that. And just a reminder for people who are tuning in and maybe joining us just now, I'm Dorie Clark, and this is my good friend, Bruce Turkel, and we are having a chat about branding, building your brand and your company's brand in 2021 and beyond. We're excited to have you here. If you have joined fairly recently, type in your name and where you're calling in from into the chat box. We would love to see who you are, say hi, and take your questions as well. So, Bruce, a question came in, which I thought is very interesting, also kind. Thank you, Rosemary. But I want to ask you this question, Bruce. Rosemary very nicely says, Dorie rose to stardom with brilliant insights on reinvention. How important is it to hitch your wagon to one big idea? That is a really interesting question. Is it important for people, Bruce, do you think, to be known for sort of one central topic, or does that matter? What is your perspective?
Well, first of all, you need to know that Rosemary is, for her to say that you've risen to stardom, she was one of the big stars of the Hispanic news media. And she now has an incredible business where she teaches people how to build their image in all of this new Zoom, WebEx technology that we're all using. So for her to say that means something, because she knows, because she worked with all the stars, certainly all the stars who spoke Spanish, and she was a star herself.
Oh my goodness. Well, muchas gracias, Rosemary. I appreciate it.
Bueno, Dorie. So the answer to Rosemary's question is a very strong yes and no. It's great if you can do it. For example, people say to me, who want to be speakers, keynote speakers, how do I become a successful keynote speaker? I say it's easy. All you have to do is land an airplane with 150 people in it in the Hudson River and save everybody's life. Because the next day, Captain Sullenberg was the most successful speaker in the United States. Highest fees, most opportunity, and then have a movie made about your life and have Tom Hanks play, or Tom Cruise if you like, play you, right? So he's linked to one thing. Or the guy, I forget his name, but the guy whose guitar was broken when he put it for United Airlines.
Dave Carroll, yes.
He wrote the song, United Breaks Guitars, and it went viral. And then he became a customer service expert. Now, I don't know the guy. I'm not putting him down. I'm sure he is an expert. But at the time, you know what he knew about customer service? He knew that United broke his guitar. That was it. He became an expert, and he built a big business. He's known for one thing. However, at some point, that one thing ends, doesn't it? If you were the king of the buggy whip manufacturers, you might be the best buggy whip manufacturer there is. But there's been 100 years since anybody cared. And before you think that hasn't happened since, tell me if you were like the world-renowned expert on MySpace, what would you be doing today? So my suggestion is that you move from being known for that one thing to being known for being you. Peter Shankman's done a great job. He was known for Haro, help a reporter out. He built an amazing online business. He sold it for a bunch of money.
I even profiled Peter in this book, Stand Out.
Yes,
told the story.
He and I ran a marathon together. He's faster than I am, I'm sorry to say. But
he's faster than you think.
Yeah,
isn't that the name of his new book?
He was. Now you made me lose my train of thought. No, I didn't. But Peter was able to transition from being the Haro guy to being Peter Shankman. Gary Vaynerchuk transitioned from being the wine guy to being Gary Vaynerchuk. Danny Deutsch ran an ad agency like I did. He then got on TV talking about branding issues like I did. He then became Donnie Deutsch, and he could talk about anything. So I think that one issue is a great way in the door. It's a great way to build a following.
A toehold.
A toehold, if you will. That's right. It's probably not a great way to stay, to continue to build your business, because the world changes and you have to change right along with it.
Love that, Bruce. Thank you so much. And just wanted to say hi to some of our new entrants. We have Sierra from Aspen, Colorado. That sounds like a very appropriate name, Sierra. I like that. We have Abby from Pittsburgh, Full from Boston, Sue from DC, Lilia from Zurich, Gail from Cleveland, Deb from Atlanta. Oh my gosh, Sue from Portland. Really glad to have all of you guys join us.
Following. Wow, I'm really digging this.
Well, we love having everyone here, and we love having exciting guests like you, Bruce. So this is really fantastic. I love it. So this is actually a great question. Kind of a follow up, Bruce. I'll weigh in, but I'd also like to get your opinion if you want to dive in on this. It looks like you're Your good pal Rashmi has a question. She says, how do you evolve from one thought leadership area to a broader and possibly more impactful space? So you were saying, Bruce, a moment ago that it's important to start by being known for a certain thing, but at a certain point you have to evolve. What are your tips or your perspectives about how best to do that?
It's no different. You asked earlier, Dorie, about what I learned from big companies and how you apply those personally. It's the same sort of thing. You establish your toehold, to use your word, based on something. Your ability to win lawsuits, your ability to bake the best pies, your knowledge of a specific thing. And that starts to get you building your business. But that's selling function, and function is cost of entry. If you're good at what you do, it gives you the right to be successful, but it doesn't make you successful. Metaphor, if you go to Vegas and you want to play at a poker table, you have to put in the ante. If you don't ante up, they don't let you play. But just because you do ante up doesn't mean you win. So being good at what you do is the same sort of thing. It's cost of entry to be an expert, but it doesn't mean you'll necessarily be successful. You do that to get in the door. You want to think bigger. So, for example, Rashmi, who I know very, very well, and she and I spent a lot of time talking about our businesses. Rashmi is an ethics speaker. She's an attorney who speaks on ethics, but now she wants to grow bigger. So what you need to do is start thinking about who you actually want to be. Let me give you an example with my own business. So I was known for branding. I ran an ad agency. We became a brand management firm, and my toehold was branding. I want people to think a couple things. I want them to think, wow, that guy, he's always coming up with new ideas. I never thought of it that way. I never looked at it that way. So that when they have a problem they can't solve, maybe we should call Bruce. Maybe he could help us. So in my blog posts, I'm writing things where I start telling one story, then I tell another story, then I tell a third story, and then somehow they all merge together and you go, oh, I didn't see that connection. That's my superpower. I happen to see those things. I want people to think that way. I don't want them to think, oh, that's a branding solution. I want them to think that's a brilliant solution. I'd like them to think, hey, he's fun to be around. He's amusing. I'd like to have a beer with that guy because we all like to do business with people we like.
You can even be president.
That they said that about him. Well, we're not going to get into politics, are we? Don't bait me like that now. But the idea is we do business with people we like, who we think can help us become who we want to be. People don't choose what you do, they choose who you are. And so when you want to move to that bigger framework, you want to demonstrate to people that you have more to offer. Brands do it too. Apple used to be computers, but you'll notice that Apple never talks about computing in any of their marketing materials. They never talk about speeds and feeds, which is the jargon for computing information, megahertz, megawatts, all of that. What they talk about is how cool you are if you use their products. So they moved from computers to laptop computers to music devices to phones, where they now make the lion's share of their money, to retail, to all those other things. They didn't sell computing. They sold you being cooler because you use their products. And they got to the point where if you were an Apple fanboy or fangirl, if you saw an Apple product, you would buy it, not because of what it does, but because of what it said about you. The reason their headphones had white wires was so people knew you were using an Apple product, because that meant you were cool. Good brands make people feel good, but great brands make people feel good about themselves. As you build your personal brand, that's your goal, is to make people feel good about themselves because they interact with you.
Love that, Bruce. Thank you very much. And I'll just add to that, Rashmi, that one of the things that I think about when it comes to reinvention or how to sort of shift from one area to another, as we were talking about earlier, I really find the idea of a Venn diagram helpful in this. And you may recall, I'll do a bad Venn diagram here in front of my face, but it's like in junior high math, it's the two overlapping circles, and then they kind of meet in the middle.
And the diamonds and the squares and
yes, so many shapes. Yes, you can totally do that. But so it's like two things and they overlap in the middle. And I think that the The crucial thing where a lot of people kind of make a mistake, you could say, in reinventing themselves or transitioning, is that oftentimes they try to make too big of a leap. They try to go from here to here, and then like no one believes it. They're like, yeah, but what do you know about this other thing? Like you're the photography guy. You're not the you're not the lawn care guy. Like what or whatever it is. And so the trick is that you need to find the overlap. You need to find that like middle space in the middle of the Venn diagram between the old thing and the new thing, and transition over. And you sort of do it incrementally so that you can make the case, right? So if you are a lawyer, but you actually want to be a screenwriter, well, okay, how do you do that? Maybe your first screenplay really ought to be about a legal topic. So people can say, oh, well, I guess that makes sense. He knows about the law. Or maybe you start trying to do more deals in entertainment law so you can actually network and make connections. And then that way you're able to sort of smooth your way over. But if it's too abrupt, then people will say like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. And so over time, what people need more, I think, is what I call strategic patience. You've got to map it out to say, all right, I might not be able to reinvent myself overnight, but if I give myself, depending on how big the reinvention is, 6 months, a year, sometimes it's 5 years if it's a dramatic reinvention. But if you can map it out and pace yourself, you actually can get almost everywhere that you possibly need to go. So I just want to greet some of the great friends who have joined us. Carrie's tuning in from Nashville. Serena from Miami Beach. That's Bruce's hometown.
I was born, Serena. I was born on South Beach. My mom still lives on South Beach.
Amazing. We've got Cindy in Texas, Carla in Mexico, my friend Melissa in London, Etienne from Paris. This is great. Gisela from Mexico. Love all this. Mandisa from South Africa. We're really glad to have you guys here. So please feel free to continue typing your questions into the chat box, anything that you want to know. But Bruce, I know you had a big list from your assistant. I want to make sure that I'm being responsible and respectful of that. So if there's other topics that you want to raise, I want to be helpful to your posse.
Well, let me raise my posse of one, actually one half, because anyways, let me continue with that theme, because I do have a question that's directly from that theme, which is, do you segment your topics for specific media outlets? We already talked about going from one idea to multiple ideas from being known for doing a thing, in your case, perhaps reinvention or multiple streams of income, two things where you've staked out, you put your flag in your ground, to being known for being Dorie Clark. What does Dorie have to say about that? Do you segment those subjects based on audiences, or do you put it out into the world with the belief that it'll bring you the people you want?
Really good question. And I would be curious, Bruce, afterwards to hear your take on this. What I will say is that I don't necessarily segment the content that I create by topic for different outlets. What I do is segregate the content based on, I guess, the format. And let me explain what I mean by that. So for instance, for a number of years, for about 3.5 years, I had a column where I was writing regularly for Forbes. And for that, I had, I basically decided that would be the place where I did interviews. And so I went nuts. I went really deep on it. And so in any given month, I would write a minimum of 5. I contractually had promised to write 5, but I would often write as many as 10 blogs per month for Forbes. So I did about 250 articles for them over the course of 3.5 years. Almost all of them, probably 97%, were interviews with other authors or thought leaders in the business field. And so I knew, okay, if I have someone I want to meet, Forbes is going to be the way that I'm doing it, because I will use the interview as a gambit to meet that person and build a connection. So that was the strategy for that. Meanwhile, Harvard Business Review, which I write for as well, they don't really do interviews. They not us anyway, not an outside contributor. They at the back. The back cover of the magazine, they have usually like a CEO interview or a celebrity interview, but that's done by a staffer. If you are reading the regular HBR.org blog, you're not going to see, oh, let me just interview my friend here. That's not how they roll. They want articles that are about synthesis. Yeah, I know. That's the only reason you're hanging out with me. Sorry.
So I got to go. But hey, it's been great talking to y'all. Thank you so much. I'm not an HBR. I'm out of here.
Yeah, Audi 5000. Anyway, so for HBR, it has to be more kind of like a expert synthesis. And so whenever I had a topic that I was like, I think I can mull on this and come up with a unique idea, I would do that. The other thing for HBR, honestly, is what I tell my clients now. Sometimes they'll say, "Oh, but is this a strategic thing for me to be writing about? I don't know." And what I tell them is like, look, if HBR tells you to write about Dalmatian breeding, you freaking do it. Okay. Like, I don't care. Like, the point is, like, it's a really big deal to get in Harvard Business Review. Whatever they want you to write about, if you have the opportunity, like, you should just do it. And later you can worry about whether it's on message or on point. The majority of the other content you create in the world, that can be on message and on point. But just to be able to say that you got into Harvard Business Review, you've even done one article, it's a really big deal. It's really big for your resume, for your bio. And so it's worth contorting yourself sometimes to just come up with the low-hanging fruit that will enable you to break in.
I would add something else to that, which is, if you're thinking about something, chances are other people are as well, because what you're thinking about, what you're writing about, is coming from the ether, coming from what you're reading, what you're seeing, what you're noticing. And so if it's not on other people's lips or minds, you might be a step ahead of them in the book. In which case, when you say, "Hey, did you ever look at it this way?" they say, "Oh my God, no, I never thought about that." If we're talking about moving from a specific interest into being who you are, then what you have to say matters. And for every single person who has put up a comment or their picture on here, what they have to say matters. And people who are interested in what you have to say will be attracted to reading it, hearing it, talking about it, if you invite them in. But if you think, "Oh, no, I better be very businesslike, I better be very careful." I mean, I'll give you just a very quick story. When I started writing my blog, I was looking for my voice. I didn't know what I was going to write about. I just knew I had to do a blog. I didn't even really know why, to tell you the truth. So I did these very academic-like articles about marketing statistics, and nobody read them. I mean, I got bored when I was proofreading them, which is never a good sign. And then one day I was pissed off about something, so I wrote about it for myself, just to get it out of my head, because I'm a writer. But I had no blog, and I told you I'm obsessed with my deadline. So I cleaned it up a little bit. I took out any incriminating names. I changed the he's to the she's to the he's, so nobody would know who they were. A lot of theys. And I printed it. And I got more readership or response than I had ever gotten on stuff that I researched and I really cared about. I was too stupid to realize what was going on. So I went back to writing about these statistical things. And then the same thing happened again. I was late. I had a little thing I had written. I posted it. That time I figured it out. People cared more about my take on things, what I thought, how I felt. And I could be humble and say, no, you don't care what I think. It's not about me. But the truth is, people did care. And as a marketer, I had to say, why are more people coming to this post than the others? So if you have something to say, if you have a song to sing, damn it, say it, sing it. Get up on the mountaintop and yell it. That's why you're here. Mark Twain said, 2 most important days in our lives are the day we're born and the day we figure out why. You can't do anything about the first. You'll probably never get the second one figured out. But if you got something to say it. And you're going to find out that people want to hear it.
Yeah, amen to that, Bruce. I think that's really powerful. So a great question came in from our friend Jimmy Tingle, former candidate for Massachusetts Lieutenant Governor. Hi, Jimmy Tingle. He says, Dorie and Bruce, how much time per day do you allocate to writing or thinking about your content? What do you think, Bruce?
Jimmy, Mr. Tingle. I have very, very clear opinion on this. I think you spend every waking minute, second, hour on it. Not to mean that you're focusing on it all the time, but you're always working on this in your head. I do a series of videos called Marketing Minutes, and it's no more than me saying, hey, you see this tree over here? You notice how it has all these roots? Well, they support it, just like my friend Dorie Clark, who talks about multiple streams of income. She has all these different things supporting her. If one root breaks, the tree doesn't fall down. If Dorie loses one of her gigs, her income really doesn't change. What does this have to do with you? Blah, blah, blah. Because I know that I'm always looking for content, I'm always looking for these opportunities. I also believe that when the muse hits you, when you come up with an idea, you stop what you're doing and write it down. I have a notebook and a pen with me at all times. When I do my runs in the morning, I have a little Sharpie that's in my laces that I can write ideas on my hand. If you have your phone, you can talk into your phone, because these ideas are like little fairy lightning bugs that fly around. And if you don't grab them right away and put them in a jar, they disappear. And then later on you think, oh, what did I want to write about? I had that great idea. So how much time do I actually spend writing? I spend a half hour, an hour a day, more or less, depending on what I need to do. Finish a book, I spend more. Write a blog post, I spend less. But how often am I thinking about it? It's always in the back of my head. And once you figure out who you are, why you matter to your audience, and what it is you want to say, it will be in the back of your head too, all the time. You just have to be aware of it, and you got to capture everything.
Love that, Bruce. Thank you. And great question, Jimmy. I will say in my experience, so Bruce answered the question, I think, in a really useful way. I will answer it in a more tactical way, which I hope is also helpful. I actually did a time tracking experiment recently. It's kind of a paired thing. I did a time tracking experiment in February of 2018, which I actually ended up writing about for Harvard Business Review. So if you Google Dorie Clark and HBR and time tracking, you can see an article that I wrote about it, to literally see in 15-minute increments how I spent my month, so I could understand where my time went. And I just did it again in December of 2020. And so it's kind of interesting to compare and contrast that. What I discovered is that actually it was remarkably similar. I spent about an hour a week writing. Like, it was like not very much. However, the important key here is I am a really big believer. I talk about this a lot in my forthcoming book. I have a new book coming out in September from Harvard Business Review Press called The Long Game. And I have a whole section talking about this. But this is part of what I call thinking in waves, because I don't spend on an ongoing basis a lot of time doing pure content creation. As Bruce said, of course, everything is copy, right? To quote Nora Ephron. So you're thinking about it. But in terms of actually writing, over the summer, when I actually was writing my book, it was like all I did. I was like all in doing it. But the majority of the time, it probably is like, an hour a week, basically. It's like maybe one blog post, maybe half a blog post, something like that. Not a lot. But during the times when I am doubling down, I am really into it. So this summer, writing The Long Game was one of them. Certainly the period, it was an extended period between 2012 and 2015 when I was writing very, very regularly for Forbes. I was all in on content creation. So it was a huge part of how I was spending my time. But once I was able to get enough traction, I created those 250 articles. That's a lot of SEO juice that you've created. And you can actually ride on that for a while. So I was able to more successfully shift at that point to doing less of content creation and more of what I'll call asset creation in terms of creating online courses and other things that I could monetize. So thanks for that great question. Did you have something you wanted to add, Bruce?
I want to answer a question if you don't mind, Dorie. No,
oh, please. Yes. Which question?
I'm reading Nicola's question, or Nicola. She says, is what you say also true for consulting business and financial services? Consultants are staffed for their experience, knowledge, methodologies. So first of all, the simple answer is yes. But the more nuanced answer is experience, knowledge, methodologies is the RTBs. It's the reasons to believe. Yes, they are hiring you for those three things. But let's be honest, if you're good at what you do, you have to know there's other people out there who are good at what they do also. So if you're only going to sell, being a financial consultant, your experience, knowledge, and methodologies, you don't really have a very strong competitive position, do you? Because you're good at it, but so is the next person and the next person and the next person. What's worse is that as the consumer, I don't have the skill set to actually judge who's the best at it. I'm not a financial consultant. I don't understand any of that stuff. So I'm making a critical decision on how well you do something without me having the tools to make that decision. And let's add a third scenario that makes it even worse, the number of moving parts that affect your success rate. Because your success rate depends on A, how long I live. I could live for another 30 years. I could drop dead tomorrow. The amount of money I need changes. The world could change. The economy could change. My marital status, well, that's not going to change. But different things could change that would affect your work. And I could be incredibly successful based on your advice, or incredibly unsuccessful based on your advice, and none of it had anything to do with you. I don't want to be in that arena because that's not a game I can win. And so my suggestion is that you look for ways to sell who you are, what you bring to the table, and more importantly, how you make that client feel about hiring you. Why are they looking for someone with your skill sets? Do they need to answer to somebody? Their spouse, their parent, their boss, Uncle Sam because of tax planning? I don't know. Are they particularly anxiety ridden about these decisions? Did they just have a big windfall or just have a big loss? Or did 2020 kick them in the shins like it did to so many of us? I don't know the answer to that. But you do after you ask some questions. And what you'll find is that the things you're good at, to use your words, experience, knowledge, and methodologies, are RTBs, reasons to believe. It's the ante to get in the game. If you don't have those things, I'm not hiring you. But just because you do doesn't mean I'm hiring you either, Nicola. Instead, it's you. People don't choose what you do, they choose who you are. It works across the board.
Thank you for that, Bruce. And thank you, Nicola, for your question. That's great. We are coming up toward the end of our hour. So if you have any last lingering questions, be sure to type them into the chat box. And I'll also mention that if you guys have enjoyed this conversation, please hit the like button, please hit the share button so that your friends and colleagues can benefit from it as well. And most importantly, if you want to continue to get insights and stay in touch, please follow Bruce Turkel. Go to his website at bruceturkel.com. You can sign up for his newsletter there, and you can do the same for me at DorieClark.com. I also have a LinkedIn newsletter as well with totally different content, and you can access that at DorieClark.com/LinkedIn. Just hit the subscribe button and you should be all set there. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. A great last question from a LinkedIn user here, Bruce, that I just wanted to share with you and get your perspective. This person wanted to know, how do you maintain authenticity as you grow or develop your brand? Do you have a key question to avoid mission bleed or mission creep, as some people call it? How do you think about this as a branding expert yourself?
Well, I will tell you that in a marketing class I took years ago, one of our instructors said the key to building a brand is sincerity and honesty. And if you can fake that, the rest is easy. But that's not actually true. And especially today, besides your own personal values, transparency is so key. I think the key is knowing two things: who you are, truly who you are, and what you want. I can't tell you how many clients I work with, either corporate or personal. I say, well, tell me, what do you want? Oh, we want more business. No, that's not really an answer. Or we want to make more money. That's not an answer. I say, okay, tell me who you are. What's special about you? What's special about your product? I don't know. They can't answer those questions. One of the things I do in my strategic roundtables in my groups is we put together an exercise called UQ, which stands for unique qualifications. What are your unique qualifications? Not your skill sets, not the things you're good at, but what makes you uniquely formidable. Because once you understand that, you understand what jobs to take, what jobs not to take, what clients to take, what clients not to take. Once you know who you are and what you want, I have to say the rest is easy. It also makes authenticity easy because there's no reason not to be. Dorie told us about a experience she had at 13, which you glossed over quite nicely, and I'm sure you've dealt with it over the years a number of times, but it had to have been painful and traumatic at the time. But it helped you move to that next step. I have to say that for most people, getting there can be painful and traumatic. Lots of us live lives because our parents told us what they expected from us, or our teachers told us what they expected from us, or our spouses told us, or our partners told us, Or we told ourselves because we saw Cary Grant or Batman or James Bond or Ursula Andress or whoever on television. Once you figure out who you are and what you want, the rest is easy.
Fantastic answer, Bruce. That's wonderful. And I'll just add in, I agree completely with what you said. And one additional point that I'll make, when it comes to authenticity, to staying true, I feel like probably the biggest tool in the arsenal, right? Sometimes, this is true for a lot of things. I think it's true for authenticity. I think it's true for even things like losing weight, right? As people sometimes think it's a question of willpower. It is, but even more, it's a question of structure. It's how do you structure things? How do you structure your life? How do you structure your incentives so that you're incentivized to do the right thing and the thing that you want to be doing all along? And so I think that in terms of staying authentic in your business, one of the most important things that has been my North Star is really always trying to be smart about living below my means, for instance, so that I never have to accept work that I don't want. When I first started my business, I bought a condo, just outside Boston in Somerville, and I bought it, deliberately in like this kind of a little rough around the edges neighborhood. It was a beautiful condo in this neighborhood that my friends literally had never been to, and I did this because I wanted to never worry about paying the mortgage. I wanted to know that, you know what, no matter what, it's going to be fine, and I have the ability to say no. And as long as you have the ability to say no, it's actually easy to be authentic. And you build that in structurally. I think a lot of people get overcommitted and they wind up incentivizing themselves to do things they don't really want to do. And so if we can be smart up front about saving and about just trying to think through what are the big moves, the big picture moves we can make in our life that give us maximal freedom. It not only gives you financial freedom, it gives you freedom of mind, and it gives you the freedom to be able to say, you know what, if this is not playing out the way that I want, I don't need it.
I'd add one thing to that. I have a rule: don't work with assholes. I don't care how much they pay. I don't care what it does. I don't care if I need the money or don't need the money. Don't work with assholes. Life's too short. I can remember everyone I worked with that I hated. I can't remember why or what we did. I can't remember how much I earned. I just remember what an awful experience it was and how it kept me from doing what I wanted to do. When I had employees, it was don't work for assholes and don't work with assholes. And I think that's well worth keeping. Work with people you want to be around.
Amen to that. What a great conversation. Awesome comments coming in the chat box. Thank you to everyone who has joined us for the past hour with a great session with Mr. Bruce Turkel. Again, you can follow him and sign up for his newsletter at bruceturkel.com. You can do the same with me at dorieclark.com. If you enjoyed this chat and would like to make sure you never miss one, be sure to sign up for my LinkedIn newsletter at dorieclark.com/LinkedIn. Bruce, thank you for taking the time to join us, my man. Great to see you here.
This was better than I ever expected. I thought you would just answer my questions. Instead, I had a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and take care, everyone.